Hello, and welcome to our humble podcast, Legal Tech Light. I am Tammy French, Head of Strategic Partnerships for Mosaic. Today I have with me Michelle Hamilton, our Managed Services Division Lead, and I also have Hannah Goss, who does project management and a lot of other stuff for us as well. Hi, ladies.
Hi, Tammy.
Today we're going to talk about LEDES format, right, in invoices and UTBMS code utilization. So I will let you take it away.
Right. So a lot of times we have firms who are trying to submit their invoices and they submit them either in non-LEDES format or without UTBMS codes when the client's guidelines specifically state that they must be in LEDES format or have the UTBMS codes. So I thought it would be a good subject to touch on. Hannah, how often do you think we get requests for invoices to be rejected back, or how often do we have to reject them back or dispute them back because they're missing those codes or they're not in LEDES format?
Too many times. It's a constant struggle between company and law firm. So this is a great topic to start with.
Right. And so whenever I have noticed that we have to go back and forth with the firm specifically for non-LEDES format because UTBMS codes, let's touch on that in a second, but about, I would say, 25 to 30% of the firms that I was working with when I first did my first big BGR client, they weren't submitting in LEDES format. So there was a lot of administrative time that I spent going back and forth with the firms and with the company because the firms would want exceptions and the company wasn't giving them out, or whatever the case is. So the administrative time that took was astronomical, to say the least. But I think that once we trained up the firms, it took so much administrative burden away. So I really believe that putting that stuff in writing and really working with the firms, really being patient and doing your due diligence and doing the training and things like that, it's only going to benefit the company, Mosaic, and the firm in the long run. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think a lot of this also starts with a united front on the company's end, because I see a lot of times where a lot of these issues start is one person says, I want these billing guidelines to be effective and everything to be in LEDES format, and the rest of the company's not behind them. And when they don't have the internal support they need, then it falls away so quickly because the firms talk to their direct contacts and they're like, oh, you don't have to do it this way. So really that united front with the company is where it starts, and then communicating that through the firms and then working with the firms, I think, is exactly how you said it.
Well, and that's a really good point too, because when you have a bunch of attorneys working with the firms and they are giving out exceptions for their specific firms that they're working closely with, but they're not communicating that with other attorneys, well, that firm might be working on other matters, and then they're confused. Okay, well, I got the exception from this attorney. Why are you not giving me the exception?
Right.
That internal communication is a very important piece.
Absolutely. And then, a lot of the LEDES format is so important, but I think one of the bigger differing opinions and questions is around the UTBMS codes that go into LEDES formatting. I've had great conversations with clients and firms on UTBMS codes, and I've had really bad conversations. And just by bad, I mean we say it's best practice to use UTBMS codes, and here's all the reasons why. But then I have a lot of pushback saying, well, is it something that's really right for us? And I think that's a big question that companies have these days. Is this right for us? And in some situations, you just kind of have to be like, laying everything out. If you don't think this is right, then we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that it's, knowing your firms. I mean, we have clients of all sizes, and our clients have firms that they work with of all sizes. If one of our clients is in the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, is one that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, they have their particular clients, or excuse me, their firms that they like to use. Some of them are larger than others. with those larger firms, those should absolutely be utilizing the correct UTBMS codes, not just throwing anything and everything in their line items. But also, it's important to realize when you've got an attorney's office that's just maybe 2-3 attorneys and a couple of paralegals, that's a lot of administrative work for them to do. And if they're not doing, an extreme amount of work for you, I just don't think that maybe for those specific firms, it's important to capture those UTBMS codes, or if it's even important to submit in LEDES format. But for larger firms and, larger clients, I definitely think it's more important to utilize that. It helps with the reporting aspect. It helps you understand your spend at a more granular level. I just think that those are really important pieces that some companies just aren't really understanding.
I absolutely agree. And I did have conversations recently with one of my larger clients who decided against UTBMS codes. And the reason for that was because they said if we have them reporting, people would want to report on it if it was available to them to be reported on. But at the current state, they have LEDES formatted invoices that they're still able to report effectively on at their current level. So this company decided, while this might be an initiative for the future at this point in time, it doesn't benefit them in any way to give more burden to their firms. But in reality, I think that time might be coming sooner rather than later as more firms see UTBMS code requirements across the board from their clients. So I do think this is more of a thing like maybe not now, maybe later, but eventually it most likely will end up in your billing guidelines one point or another.
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't know that. That's interesting. I didn't know you had a client that was, dealing with that at this time. So that's interesting.
Yes, we had some very interesting conversations, and they actually used another consulting company in addition to us. They're actually partners of ours that we love, work closely with. They're fantastic people. I love talking to them, and they had very strong opinions of against UTBMS codes at this point in time, not necessarily in the future. So I love having those kinds of conversations, though. Like, please bring them to me. Let's see what actually works, and bring me all the challenges that you're facing.
Well, that's another really good point is, when our clients are thinking about putting these initiatives in place, whether or not to use LEDES formatted invoices, whether or not to use UTBMS codes, whether or not to have outside counsel guidelines, those things are so important to, bring to us so we can break it down. Let's talk it out. Let's make sure we're understanding the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, so to speak. And so I'm really glad that your client took the time to speak with you and our partner to, make that decision and get an informed, two informed opinions before making a final decision.
Absolutely. And another example I have where I found UTBMS codes to be of the utmost importance is I have a company who was uncertain how to handle timekeeper rates.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I was like, LEDES invoicing, UTBMS codes, you want to be able to understand what firm A is billing you for the same task that firm B is doing. Who is completing these tasks? Does a partner need to do every single task on this invoice? Kind of thing. And you really have that granular reporting. And when showing them this, we actually came across invoices where they were being accidentally duplicatively charged because they were having tasks. The invoices did not match 100%, but the tasks did.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, so we actually we had to work out and go back to the firm, and I, coordinated the communications with the firm, and we're actually to save the company money because the firm didn't even realize they were doing it.
Wow.
And it's not the firm's fault by any means, because sometimes, the billers don't have all the information, right? There's some bills that they're being sent. So we showed this to them, and they're like, oh my gosh, we had no idea. We're going to take it off all the rest of the invoices that we give you guys. But without that granular reporting, how are you going to know?
Exactly. That's a really, really good piece. And, we will later on in our podcast series do a reporting podcast. And I think that Tammy and I will definitely have you on for that one because you have been a reporting guru since the very beginning. So that's amazing. And, there was one other piece that I wanted to quickly mention, and that is to the timekeeper rates. that's another really vital piece to this, because, you know, whether or not you're using the UTBMS codes, if you're using a LEDES formatted invoice, you really should have timekeeper rates in there. That way, not only can you compare the rates between firms for different, you know, whether it's partner versus partner, paralegal versus paralegal, just so you have that idea of what those firms are charging, but also, you know, it's helpful to understand, you know, you use firms that are not necessarily in the same area as you. You might have, you know, cases across the country, and, you know, it's important to have those timekeeper rates, and so you know what rates you're paying across the board. So when the client can see the benchmark timekeeper rates across the board, across, you know, all of their firms, across regions or states, country, whatever, it's just another really good piece of information that they can have. And on their invoice, when they're looking at their, you know, line item detail, they can see who submitted the line item, or not who, I'm sorry, but who worked on that particular task, the time they spent, the money that they charged per hour for, you know, that task, what have you. But benchmarking those is really important too.
Absolutely. I have a client now that has decided to allocate a team member to timekeeper rates, getting prepared for the submissions for next year, because they enabled it. They've got the LEDES invoices, UTBMS, and they understand it. And now it's going from understanding how timekeeper rates work to actually using the data they have from the year they started and moving forward to have cost savings from actually understanding and looking at their previous timekeeper rates. So I'm very impressed that they have allocated that resource, and I've been working with them to provide the timekeeper rates reports, and I'm so excited to see how next year's timekeeper rate submission goes.
Absolutely. And, you know, we kind of went off track a little bit with talking about timekeeper rates, but it's another really important piece here. And I'm just really glad that that kind of came up in this conversation. All of these things, utilizing the guidelines, or I'm sorry, creating the guidelines and then utilizing the guidelines, using UTBMS codes, and submitting in LEDES format, using proper timekeeper rates and rate sheets, those things, those are only going to be cost savings, you know, and again, that's that administrative burden that we're, you know, taking off by doing these things on the front end.
Absolutely.
And all of these points are, again, a really great reason why using a third party to look over all of this is just, it's a really great piece to what you're doing, because Hannah's got so much insight. Michelle, you've got so much insight, you know, having worked with this before, you've seen everything across the gamut. So, you know, it's always nice to have somebody look at everything and say, here's where, you know, you could do this or that, which is really where Mosaic can come in and help.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that getting in there and picking apart somebody's system, so to speak, finding out what things they could be using better, what things they're using really well, and what things that they may not find much benefit in, I think that's a really fun piece. And Hannah, I know that you could speak to that, because that's part of what you do on a day-to-day.
Oh, yes, I love it, because we have clients that started in 2008 and were thrown in, and I want to rip it apart. Just, you know, how can we make this better? How can we make this fit your current operations better? And then we have clients, you know, that have new systems, and they have, you know, started doing this in 2018. And I'm like, you could still, let's go back. You know, 2 years is a long time. Let's take another look. Let's go back. What can be improved better? Your company's changing, so should your operations.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies. In the interest of keeping this a little on the shorter side, so it holds people's attention, I'm going to let you go now. But anybody who would like to contact us, it's support@mosaiclegalops.com. Please feel free to contact any of us at that point. And if anyone else has anything else, otherwise, have a great day.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you, Hannah.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.